everybody, this is Brittney, and welcome to our latest episode of the Reclusive Blogger Interviews. On this episode, I interview Patrick Cortes. The electronic musician is behind some of the coolest music on some of the biggest podcasts, including Undisclosed. Now he's releasing an independent solo album featuring euphoric and atmospheric sounds under the moniker AnimalWeapon. The album, titled Set of Constraints, fuses electronic elements in lush dream pop. Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Brittney?
I am great. I've just mainly been writing. I was doing an album review, so that was it. It was just I've been kind of busy with that all day.
Oh, cool.
How about you?
Not too bad. Feeling really good after having the album done, and just got to announce a cool festival show yesterday. So I'm feeling pretty great these days.
What was the festival that you announced?
So it's called Bull City Summit, and it's basically Durham's. I think Durham is the next town over from Raleigh. Durham is kind of, I guess, starting their own kind of South by Southwest type festival. Mm-hmm. So it's not just a music festival, but it's got, just like South by Southwest, it's got, arts, technology, conferences, that kind of thing. And it's all over town, at different venues. So their music festival is playing across, I think 4 different venues. And they asked me to headline one of them on, that festival, on the Friday night of that festival, which is the end of March. So really excited about that.
Oh, that's awesome. Congrats on that one.
Yeah, thanks. Huge news. One of the cooler things that's happened to me. So.
Actually, that was like one of my questions I was going to ask you is, what was kind of like the biggest thing that you had from the past year? Because I know the past year's kind of been up and down for a lot of people.
Yeah, it has been. I guess really just finishing the album and doing it as relatively quickly as I did was a big accomplishment by itself for me. Because I usually take forever, and this time I got it done in around a year. So that by itself was really cool, and then just getting to shoot the video and the warm reception that we've gotten from the video for Deserve, and just the single by itself, and everything kind of falling into place very, very quickly. It has been really cool.
And now that you mentioned the single, that was something else I was going to ask you about. Kind of delve into more about what the single's about and how you kind of made the music video for it.
So the single kind of came together very quickly. I thought I was about done with this album, and in fact, at the time, I kind of thought that it was, I was shooting for an EP, and I thought it was done, and then I kind of got to this point where I realized how badly I needed to address my depression, and start really, really working on it. And I started going to therapy, and then I also, same time, and pretty much for the same reason, I went through this creative spurt, and just like boom, 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 had a bunch of new song ideas that I did very quickly, and I wound up with 3 new songs. And all of a sudden I'm like, this is an album now and not an EP. And Deserve was one of those. So, the whole, I feel like people might listen to it and feel like it's depressing. because it's got that kind of somber tone to it, but it's kind of the opposite of that. It's more about just realizing that you deserve to be happy and you don't realize to, kick your own ass all the time. And then that came together. That song by itself came together really, really fast. I recorded everything at home, and then we mixed it. I mixed it with my boy Travis Dark, who's a very, very good producer out of Winston-Salem, which is a couple towns over, like 2 hours from here ish, hour and a half, and mixed that all in one night at his place and got it mastered very soon after that. And within that same time period, we shot the video. I think we actually shot, this was in October, and we actually shot the video before we had finished mixing the song, because it's not the kind of, it's the kind of video that doesn't need to be set beat for beat by the music. Yeah. So we didn't even have the finished mix or master by the time we shot the video, and all of that stuff came together inside of 3 weeks, which was crazy. And Scott just happened to be free around that time, and I was like, we were getting ready to get another single out the door for the album, because I hadn't put out anything since 2020 with Summer's Over as far as like a big single goes. And we were about to get this one track out the door, and then I started coming up with Deserve, and I was like, wait, this has to be the single. This has got to be the single. And he was like, and I was like, and I kind of have a loose idea for it, which stayed a loose idea pretty much because I don't feel like the video is super highly conceptual. It's more like a mood piece. But he was like, well, shit, I can fly there next week and shoot it. And so he just did. And it fell together very, very easily. The bar scenes that are at the beginning of the video is this bar, Auntie Betty's, which is a place that I frequent. There's only 4 people that work there, and I'm friends with all of them, including the owner. Greg was super cool about letting us come in and shoot. We picked a Tuesday night because Tuesdays aren't typically very busy over there, and it fell into place perfectly. We got all the bar stuff done in one night, and then shot the rest of the walking around Raleigh stuff. We managed to get in a second night, so 2-night shoot and very easy.
You mentioned that a lot of your music and a lot of the stuff you've been dealing with has been surrounded by mental illness and mental health. Is that something you've always been comfortable talking about, or was that something that is more recent for you?
It's much more recent. I mean, it's driving me nuts that it's just at the slightest little angle. I've got to fix it. Okay, that's better. I've always been, at least for the past couple of years, I've been pretty open about, saying that I have depression, but it's not something that's been, I don't discuss it a whole lot. I don't really, I've never really tried to hide that. I know, I'll put it this way. I've never tried to hide the fact that I have depression. Mm-hmm. What I have done and realized that I've been doing a pretty good job of for years is pretending that I'm okay. And I feel like only people that are around me, that have been around me really consistently, had much of an idea. And once I started really evaluating how I need to handle myself and being like, I don't want to be this miserable anymore, and started putting in the work, it got a lot easier to talk about too. So
I know for a lot of people, especially with the pandemic, it's been kind of extremely rough. So to hear more artists talk about it, especially as I've been doing a lot of interviews lately, I know a lot of people have been more open about whatever issues they've had that they've been struggling with. So I guess
Yeah.
my next question is, how did you come up with the name Animal Weapon? And because it's an interesting name.
Yeah. So I'm kind of occasionally Scott's gonna kill me for saying this. I occasionally actually get really sick of the name, but I've stuck with it for so long. I can't change it now. But it came about it was 11 years ago. I was finishing up like the first song, and I was trying to figure out a name for like the project. Like, what is this? I didn't want to put my own name on it. I wanted something that sounded like a band name so that I could, so that the music would sound like it could have been done by a band, but it was really just me. But then I would also have the opportunity to bring other people in, kind of like Gorillaz or Nine Inch Nails, something like that.
Yeah.
And I was reading a Deadpool comic, and at the beginning of it, he was injecting hamsters with rabies and stuffing them into the barrel of a shotgun, and then like a bill collector or something, like, or maybe the IRS came to his door and he like shot a rabid hamster out of a shotgun. So literally a weapon that fires animals.
So it's like really crazy and really just like something that's just like the most random thing ever.
And it sounded cool at the time. Like I said, I'm kind of sick of it now. The interesting thing about it is I picked something that was a vague enough kind of name that I could switch gear, because I mean, it's electronic music and it's kind of dream pop right now, but if you wanted to use that name for a metal band, that would also totally work.
It can work for a lot of stuff, actually.
Yeah, pretty much. I wanted to give myself that latitude. So,
I guess I wanted to kind of talk about a little bit more about how your typical creative and writing process is for Animal Weapon, and I know you also have done podcasts. You've written music for podcasts, and are those processes different? Or are they kind of similar?
So writing for Animal Weapon and doing stuff for podcasts are worlds apart. For Animal Weapon stuff, there's not really a typical process. It kind of boils down to 3 or 4 different methods. Sometimes it just comes from me sitting down and not really having any kind of roadmap or really even an idea at all, and I'll just sit there with Logic and start playing around with sounds and flipping through it. When it starts this way, it's almost always starting with me flipping through Serum presets or looking at stuff on Splice and seeing if there's anything that that like grabs me. So that's one way, and I feel like that's most of the time. And very rarely I'll have a melody pop into my head and I'll have to go recreate it, even if I just hum it into my my voice memos on my phone, and find a way to recreate it later and then find the right sound for it. The melody coming to me first is a pretty rare occurrence. And then, or sometimes I'll just have, a cool rhythm pop into my head that I need to go replicate, on, whatever drums, even if I just start on like an 808 kit. So those are the 3 general ways that it starts. Every once in a while, there's some kind of combination of those, but it's almost always that the instrumental comes together, and and I'm writing the lyrics as the instrumental is coming together. Sometimes the entire instrumental is done before I have almost any of the lyrics. And writing lyrics goes all over the place because sometimes I'll sit down and write the whole song in 10 minutes or less. And then sometimes it will straight up take me years because I'll have what I think is a really good instrumental. This happened with Turn the Lights Down. And like Fourth Quarter was another one. And it was one of those things where, you know, I had the instrumental for a very long time. Like Turn the Lights Down, especially. I did that whole instrumental in maybe a weekend. And it wasn't until 2 years later that I had finished the lyrics and recorded them, and then it came out not that long after I finished recording it. I mean, but I'm kind of glad that it worked out that way. And by the way, just in between those two times, I'm listening to that instrumental constantly, like at least a couple times a week, just seeing if anything will come to me and being like, I don't know how much longer this is going to take. Might be another year, but I know this one's going to be good. And I'm almost always right about that because I feel like Turn the Lights Down is one of my best ones.
That doesn't like bother you where you get something for like years and
it bothers
later...
the shit out of me, but I don't, I can't, I mean, I don't really, it takes how long it takes, and I would much rather for songs like that, especially with like Turn the Lights Down, I'm glad it took that long rather than me just being like, let me just crap something out and hope it's okay.
And forcing the issue and kind of forcing lyrics that don't fit.
Right. And plus the other thing is Turn the Lights Down, I think I actually needed to go through some shit first before I wrote because I was like, I know this has got to be, but I don't have it. It's not coming to me. And that year I went through a really, really awful breakup. I was not doing great for a good few months. This was like 2015. And I had gone through like awful breakup, and I was kind of just starting to put myself back together. And I was like, okay, I want to get back to music. I really want to finish this EP. And that's when the rest of those lyrics came to me. And I was like, I don't think I could have written this song. At least not the way that I wrote it. I don't think I could have written this song if I hadn't gone through that. So sometimes they just take time to get to you.
Yes, it's almost like you write maybe a half of the song and you write the other half, and they just kind of meet each other in the middle, whether that takes months or weeks or years. That's interesting.
Yeah. And the way that I write lyrics is very, very interesting because I write across different mediums. Because sometimes, let me see if I've got. So sometimes I'll write stuff in a notebook. If I'm not by a notebook and a random line pops into my head, I'll put it in my notes app real quick. But if I'm sitting down writing, I have this chaotic mess in here. Like here's where I was writing the lyrics for Know What You Are. And I will just pick random parts of a page, like a corner, and I'll start scribbling down a couple of lines. And then I'll pick another random part of the page that's nowhere close to it. And then once I start getting phrases together, like, I don't know how well you can see this, but I'll draw like a little bracket around it and be like, okay, I think that's one part of one verse. This all goes together. And then I'll rewrite it over and over. And then once I finally have got everything, then I'll go back and write it cleanly down the lines. So I don't know why I do it that way, but
it's kind of similar to when I'm like writing something that's long form, like a album review. I'll just jot down notes and then I'll go back and kind of fill it all in together so it's more coherent. Because sometimes you just have to get out the words so you don't forget and stuff like that. Because you get mad at yourself later when it's like, oh, that was a good line or something, and you don't. That's the worst feeling ever.
Yeah, I hate looking back on stuff and being like, shit, that would have been But that's why I take so long with this stuff, because I'm trying to minimize how much I have to do that, and then, but all of that's very, very different from like the podcast stuff. The podcast stuff is kind of easy breezy for me. It's at least as far as the process feels easy. I mean, not to say it doesn't take a lot of hard work, but it doesn't feel as taxing because I'm not emotionally invested in it. With the podcast stuff, like I love working with Rabia. She's always fun to work with, and I think we're probably going to just keep, whenever she knows I'm on call whenever she needs me. But like the other stuff that I've done, at the same time, it's not really my music, right? It's meant to serve a different purpose. And it also really can't call too much attention to itself if it's supposed to be something that's going on in the background, right? So that I've got that going for me. I don't have to worry about keeping a listener hooked, because the music's not supposed to be doing that anyway. And, just the overall not being emotionally attached to it, none of that podcast stuff is ever going to be a representation of, something big that I went through or some big conceptual idea. It's a lot less involved, and I don't have to pour my heart and guts into it, Yeah. I just have to make stuff that suits a mood.
How did you even get involved into the podcast music? 'Cause I had never really thought about that when I was listening to podcasts, that there was like, oh yeah, music in the background.
Somebody's got to do it.
That? Yeah.
Well, so the first thing I did was Rabia Chaudhry's Undisclosed podcast, and that is almost an unofficial, I really hate to call it, I don't want to call it like a sequel, but it was born from the first season of Serial, because Serial didn't really get into enough of the details, and really I feel like, honestly, for entertainment value, it felt like it intentionally left it on an ambiguous note as to whether or not Adnan, it was guilty, which is, I think, horrible, because this is somebody's real life, and he's been wrongfully convicted, and a teenage girl is dead, and we still don't know why. And I started listening to Undisclosed because Rabia telling the rest of Adnan's story. She still talks to Adnan constantly. Her brother is still best friends with Adnan. And so I started listening to Undisclosed, and I started following Rabia on Twitter. And I noticed that Rabia was very engaged on Twitter, and seemed to have a really good involvement with her followers, and would frequently be tweeting them back, or so I don't know why it popped into my head, but I just thought, why don't I just tweet and offer my services? So I just tweeted at Rabia, hey, free music if you want it. And I didn't really think that was going to go anywhere. Went to bed, and the next morning, she had gotten right back to me, and she was like, yeah, we're interested. And then I just, I got in touch with the producer, Rebecca, and, just started working from there. And I did not always do it for free. They wound up paying me anyway. So I had initially offered to do it for free, and then when season 2 rolled around, they were like, okay, well, we're paying you for this season, and we're going to pay you for last season too. So So all's well that ends well.
Sometimes when you shoot your shot, you just never know, and that's what happened there.
And and it was not about money at all. I really just wanted to be part of it, and it's still one of the coolest working experiences that I've had. Like I said, I love working with Rabia. She's one of my favorite people. She's a total badass, and I kind of want to be her when I grow up. So,
I guess are there any musicians that you would like to collaborate with, and why?
Oh God, oof. That's a tough question for me to answer because I know. So the short answer is yes, there are some, but I don't know that I actually really want to, because I feel like I'm very prone to imposter syndrome, and I feel like I would be freaking all the way out if I was in a room with one of those people. And I would worry about, I feel like I would worry about fanboying too much. And I would be just worried constantly about disappointing somebody. So I don't know. I mean, obviously, I'd love to work with somebody like Phanogram. Those two they seem like they're really cool. I met them briefly once at one of their shows, but they seem like they'd be a lot of fun to work with. I don't know. Man, that's a tough one. Because I have to evaluate how scared am I of disappointing this person, or like getting in the room with them and they're like, oh, this dude's whack.
Yeah, when you talk about imposter syndrome, it's kind of amazing to hear like artists that you think are like on such a really high level and opening like huge shows and like arenas and stadiums, and they still have it.
Yeah.
And so it's crazy. It's
a tough thing to remember. Yeah.
So it's always crazy. You're like, well, I'm not really doing that much, or I'm at these levels, and everybody still struggles with that.
Yeah.
So
it was wild. I mean, the same thing happened to me. It's constant, right? Anytime something cool happens, it's still like, I've got it right now with with that festival that I'm going to be playing in Durham. I'm like, why am I the headlining? I know I'm going to get there that night, and I'll be like, what the hell am I doing here? And it was the same thing when I went to the Webbies a few years ago, because I won a Webby for the music I did on Undisclosed. And it probably didn't help that I was completely by myself. I didn't bring anybody with me. That I go to that ceremony, and I'm like, okay, this is wild. I'm at this big, fancy event in Brooklyn, and there's oh my God, Solange is sitting 2 tables over from me. That's wild. And Joel McHale is hosting. I'm like, there was so many times that night that I was like, I don't think I belong here. I think they got the wrong guy.
Yeah, it's crazy because I've just recently started this podcast, and so anytime someone is like, yeah, sure, I'll be on here, and I'm just like, okay, this is weird, because I didn't want to do the podcast at first, and because I'm always nervous talking to people on camera or even in person and stuff. So you just have to get through it and be like, well, people are on here for a reason. So it's something people struggle with, and it's amazing that at every level people still have that syndrome. It's crazy.
Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder, is there ever a point where you're going to feel like you belong there,
Yep.
Or is it just going to be like that no matter how,
Yeah.
Like at one point, you just accept that you're not an imposter, right? So.
Yeah, because I was wondering about that because I don't know if it was an interview that I was reading or something, because it was somebody that was really kind of shocked to hear that, and this person has like Grammys and all these things, and I was just kind of like, wow. And this is and you're like, okay, so maybe you have a point there.
Maybe it just always happens no matter what, and it's something you gotta just kind of deal with. That's what therapy's for.
Yeah. I guess my next question would be, what fictional character do you think would most identify with your music?
That is a really awesome question, and I've definitely never gotten anything like that. Fictional character that would listen to Animal Weapon. Man, see, this is tough because I know no matter what I say, later tonight, I'm going to be doing whatever I'm doing later tonight, and I'm going to be like, shit, that's who it should. That's who I should have said. I know I'm not going to say the right person right now. Okay, I'm trying to think if somebody from. I'm trying to stop and break down, like run through my favorite franchises, right? So, okay, Star Wars. I don't know why, and I can't put my finger on it. I feel like Rose Tico from Star Wars would be a fan. I don't know why. I can feel it. Let's see. See, I know, like I said, I know later tonight I'm going to be like, God damn it, that's who.
I always say go with the first answer that comes to your mind. That's the one. I always say that one.
Yeah.
So they go with the first one that comes to your mind.
I gotta say Rose. I also feel like, and I'm not necessarily sure which one, but I feel like at least one of the kids from Stranger Things would probably be down with my music.
Mm-hmm. It has that the sense and everything.
Yeah,
I can. Yeah.
I feel like one of those kids would be into it. Maybe not all of them, but maybe all of them. Yeah, no, I'm just trying to read. I think that's all I've got for those. Maybe Peter Parker would be into it. I could see Peter Parker being in an Animal Weapon.
Okay, but now to kind of level up on that question, which version?
So definitely not Tobey Maguire version. I think probably the most likely Peter Parker would be Andrew Garfield, but I could also totally see Tom Holland Peter Parker. Yeah. Andrew Garfield Peter is probably the most likely one.
That's actually my brother's favorite. I think is the Andrew. Wait, no, I don't. I'm going to get this wrong. I'm not sure. Never mind. I'll just say my favorite. My favorite's Tom Holland.
I mean, Tom Holland is definitely my favorite. I mean, no shade to the other two, but yeah, Tom Holland's a national treasure, not our nation's treasure, but but he is for England. So,
I guess my next question would be, what has been since you do music for podcasts, what is one podcast that you've been listening to a lot lately that you really enjoy? Too many to name.
I know because it's the opposite, because there's only one right now, and it's Bodega Boys, Desus and Mero's podcast. It's Desus and Mero's podcast. They they have a show on Showtime, but they've had the podcast for a lot longer. And it's just two dudes from the Bronx talking shit for an hour and a half or two, and I've been listening. I go for a walk almost every day and just listen to it, and it's hilarious. There's no format to it. It's very off the cuff. I mean, there's a lot of recurring jokes and, sound drops and stuff like that. But I mean, it's so funny. And they haven't put out a new episode in a hot minute, but I've been listening backwards just pretty much constantly. I get through a few episodes a week probably. And yeah, I've been listening backwards for a couple months. Because there was a stretch where I kind of fell off and wasn't listening to any podcasts at all for maybe a year or so. So I know there's a lot that I missed there. And now I'm back into like October of 2019. So yeah, so that's what a few months of listening that's how far back I've gotten. But the podcast has been going since I started listening to it in like 2016. So.
Oh, okay. I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, it's great.
My next question would be if AnimalWeapon had a podcast, what would be the first 3 guests on the podcast?
I mean, the first 2 would be Jesus and Marrow. But I'm going to count those as one. First 3 guests. See, I'm trying to see if I would strike a balance between. I'm trying to see if I would get like, famous people, or I might want to just kick it with people that I know, I know for sure I would eventually, if I had a podcast, I would eventually have my sister, Abby, on, because she's really, really funny. She's one of the funniest people I know. Shout out to you, Abby, if you're listening to this. So yeah, I'm going to go with, I think I would probably have like a healthy mix of celebrities and people that I know. So I'm trying to think of who the third, I would probably also want to typically have, if I had a podcast, it would not be heavy at all. I would always get fun guests, and nobody that would get too deep into anything. It would all be people that I can joke around with, or that I can talk about nerdy stuff with. Let's go back to Star Wars. Let's say John Boyega. Just pulling him out of Star Wars.
Yeah.
That'd be really... He seems like he'd be really fun to talk to.
Yeah, he gets pretty lit on Twitter sometimes.
Yeah, he does.
He's like, I'm not taking this mess.
Nope. Yeah, John Boyega does not play on social media.
No, he's like, nope, that's not happening.
Nope.
I guess
what I love about him.
I guess I don't know how much more time we have left, but I guess my other question I meant to ask earlier, which was, what were some of the musicians that shaped your childhood or teenage years?
So I grew up, I don't want to say like that my family was like that super, super musical family, but I mean, it was musical enough. It was more musical than I feel like maybe the average family. But I grew up with a lot of Motown, a lot of Beatles, the Beach Boys, both my parents. My dad, Beach Boys was more my dad. Both my parents loved the Beatles. And yeah, lots of Motown, but then of course, when I was little, also lots of Disney soundtracks. And then as I got into, as I got older, started listening to, just top 40 radio, and then then of course once you're a teenager, you start getting into other stuff and you're too cool for whatever's on the radio. Right. So teenage years was definitely more. I was into a lot more rock at like during my teenage years. That's in part how I got into Nine Inch Nails.
Yeah, one of my favorites.
Nirvana was like my first.
Yep.
You know, like a grown up good band. You know what I mean? Air quotes. But yeah, that Nirvana I think was the kind of the me breaking into that, and that was maybe when I was 12, I want to say. And yeah, stuff just kind of branched out from there. All the kind of likely candidates. And it wasn't until like later teenage years that I started to kind of get into electronic music, and it got to a point where, pretty much starting from my, early 20s, like 20, probably by like 22, 23, almost all I listened to was electronic music and hip hop, obviously. So, I mean, hip hop was another thing for, teenage years, but I didn't start getting into I don't want to say I didn't start getting into hip hop that wasn't like immediately on the radio until a few years into that, right? And I was an angsty teenage white boy, so of course I liked Eminem, and it wasn't until a few years later after that, like maybe later in high school, that I started getting into stuff like Mos Def or Talib Kweli or Common, that kind of stuff.
What's your favorite Nirvana album?
I think In Utero. I mean, I feel like the easy answer is to say Nevermind, and maybe it is Nevermind, but I mean, I also really, really love In Utero. I haven't heard it in forever though, and every time I hear it, unless it Smells Like Teen Spirit, anytime I hear Nirvana somewhere, I'm like, man, why haven't I put on a Nirvana album in years? And then I still don't. So I really need to. I should probably put on In Utero this weekend.
Mine is Bleach.
Yeah, Bleach is really fun. I used to, when I very, very first started kind of learning how to play guitar, I would play a couple songs off of Bleach with one of my buddies. Like I think we recorded a really crappy cover of About a Girl, I want to say.
I like that one.
Yeah, it's a good one.
I like because it's like really, really just raw.
It's raw. The production is not very good,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, you can listen to Bleach versus Nevermind and see a pretty stark. Yeah.
Yeah. I like Sifting off of there. That's my favorite one off of there. You can the clear difference between from like 1989 when that one came out to In Utero and it still kind of have some of the same kind of grittiness, but they took the grittiness from Bleach and kind of cleaned it up In Utero, because there's still some that kind of grittiness. It's, I don't know, but
it's more refined. It's more refined.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess we're going to end it on these last questions, which are kind of throw in a few this or that questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
I know. Instagram or TikTok?
TikTok. Some of the funniest stuff I've seen in a long time has been on. I mean, Instagram's fun, but TikTok for sure.
Sunrise or sunset?
Sunset. I'm not a morning person, but I love a sunset.
Iced coffee or hot coffee?
Ice.
Summer or winter?
Summer.
Museum
I get very depressed in the winter.
Museum or movie theater?
Movie theater.
Last one, big party or small gathering?
Small gathering. Small gatherings are a lot more meaningful. I'm definitely past my big party years. I had fun at them, but.
And I had the last one. Is there anything I might have missed, and what's kind of next on the horizon for you?
I didn't miss anything. So I've got my performance at Bull City Summit on March 25th, and then I've got a new single coming out before then. I'm just gonna say March, and then my new album, Set of Constraints, will be out April 15th. Sorry, the album release show will be April 14th, and the album itself will be out April 15th.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much for tuning in, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. See you in the next episode.